It is Thursday, 7th of September 2023. There's a heat wave here in the UK. Of course there is. The kids went back to school this week. So after a summer of rain and wind and extremely mild temperatures making it impossible to plan any kind of family holiday in the UK with any sort of reliability, the minute the schools go back, of course, we get the hottest weather of the year. Today is scheduled to reach about 30 degrees, making it the hottest day of the year so far. So who said weather manipulation? It's Daddy Longlegs season. It's incredible how, like clockwork, the minute September kicks in, these things are absolutely bloody everywhere. And they really are dumb. It reminds me of a sketch by Ricky Gervais of several years ago, where he was talking about how a Daddy Longlegs would just sort of hang around by the side of an open window for 7 or 8 hours without actually going out the window, and just like hover around the frame, and it's so thick it can't work out that that's its path to freedom. So these things are annoying. I had one fly into my mouth earlier today. That's how dumb they are. Having said that, I would never harm one, because I've got respect for all living sentient beings, no matter how dumb they are, and I would never knowingly cause harm to any of them. But I just wonder what their purpose is in the grand scheme of things. What do they contribute with such low levels of consciousness and such short lives? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I'm sure it makes sense in the grand scheme of things somehow. I want to talk this video about an event named Burning Man Festival, which has been in the news the last few days. I think this might tie into the whole issue of weather manipulation, actually, which is a very real thing. We know that the so-called controllers have the technology to change the weather in all kinds of ways. So if you've not caught the story, just by way of a brief recap, Burning Man takes place every Labour Day weekend for around a week. So it's either side of Labour Day, very end of August, and the first few days of September. It's a festival that's been running since 1986. The first one took place in San Francisco on a beach, and shortly after that it moved to a remote desert location in Nevada. It's known as Black Rock City. Go figure. Immediately puts me in mind of the Black Rock Corporation, responsible for so much harm and damage around the world. It takes place on former military land. Is there such a thing as former military land? In the same way as, is there such a thing as a former military MI5 CIA agent? Do you ever really get to leave? Does that land ever really go back to private ownership? So there's a few red flags there. It's several hours from the nearest town by road, and it's served by its own airfield, which is some distance away from Reno Airport, the nearest major airport. So it's pretty bloody remote. The most interesting thing about Burning Man, though, is the symbolism and the ritual that it comes drenched in. So the culmination of the several days' activities involves the burning of the effigy of a man, hence the name of the festival. So this immediately puts me in mind of the movie The Wicker Man, 1973. My recent Good Vibrations guest Sean McHugh made some observations about that movie. Also the cremation of care ceremony, the ritual, which concludes the annual Bohemian Grove gathering, where the so-called elites, the psychopaths of this world, gather together, dress up in robes, and worship the effigy of a 40-foot stone owl, whilst committing a mock, we're told, sacrifice of a child. Is it really mock? Better hope it is. But either way, Burning Man, for those reasons, is a very strange gathering. So it's said to be an arts festival. It also has performances of all kinds, including music performances, and it's attracted many DJs on the electronic dance music scene over the years. So, for example, Carl Cox, who's a guy that I've been studying, had my eye on for quite some time, has been performing at Burning Man for many years. And going back a while, he never used to announce it. It was like a best kept secret. So he would break his summer season at Space in Ibiza and take that week out to fly out to Nevada to perform sets at Burning Man, but never actually talk about it. It's only in the last couple of years that he's been promoting his gigs there and admitting to being on site, so I wonder why that would have to be all hushed up. There's also been the likes of Skrillex, Diplo, Tiesto and various others on the EDM scene who have performed at Burning Man over the years. I did a really interesting interview a few years ago with a guy named Steve Altroom. So he used to appear on shows with Jan Irvin and Joe Atwill back in the day when they used to do Unspun. Great series of podcasts. I learnt a lot from them about the dynamics of social engineering, lifetime actors and culture creation. And Steve Altroom guested on a couple of those shows talking about his experiences at Burning Man. I also did a Good Vibrations interview with him in 2017 alongside Jan Irvin where we got into all this stuff. Now, unfortunately, Jan Irvin has really sort of disappeared off the scene pretty much and really dropped the ball when it comes to putting out great information, which is a real shame. There's been all kinds of things going on there behind the scenes, so it seems. Joe Atwill has continued putting out shows. He's partnered with Tim Kelly of Our Interesting Times to put out his output. The most interesting thing that Steve Altroom has had to say about Burning Man is its apparent connection to the big tech industry coming out of California. So IT, Silicon Valley, conglomerates, and its connectedness to transhumanism and pushing ideas of AI futurism. And this has been the case since Burning Man's inception in 1986. Many other things happened that year, such as the establishment of the World Wide Web, for example. And also there are links to the electronic dance music scene. I got into that recently with my guests on the Second Summer of Love episodes that I put out. And Steve has spoken of how those that work in the IT industry are almost expected by default to attend Burning Man. Now, isn't that a bit of a strange thing? If you're working in technology, why would there be an expectation for you to go out to a very remote desert location around Labor Day weekend every year and spend several days among all kinds of bizarre occult symbolism, art performances and things of that nature? It only really makes sense if it represents some kind of initiation for those that work in those industries, along the lines of the occult belief systems and religious sort of practices of the priest class, the practitioners who preside over all these different aspects of society. How else would it make sense, right? And why is it only Burning Man which this expectation applies to and not any other art or music festivals? The connection between big tech and futurism and occult symbolism of the type that we see at Burning Man actually goes back a very long way. There were a series of events in the 1940s in New York known as the Macy Conferences. These took place at various venues in the city, and it brought together behavioural scientists, propagandists, those representing technology, financiers, banksters, and social scientists to work out how technology could best be harnessed to control large numbers of people. So this stuff was getting discussed at these conferences the best part of 70 years ago, 80 years ago even. And so many of the things that would have been discussed in those times are only just getting rolled out now. Now that is forward planning, that is dedication, that is patience, and that is what we're dealing with on the part of these controllers. They do play the long game. And the whole California tech industry did share a connection with the counterculture hippie flower power scene which came along in the 1960s. There's been so much evidence, not least through the work of the likes of Jan Irvin and Joe Atwill, to show that the counterculture scene was to a very large extent sponsored, payrolled, controlled by the CIA. It was the CIA that was putting all the LSD into all these hippie communes and festivals and gatherings. It was the CIA that was putting forward false prophets, consciousness gurus like Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, and so many others that were leading the young people of the time off down a false path of so-called enlightenment by embracing Eastern mysticism and such. And all this was happening in conjunction with mind-altering drugs, LSD, and all the rest of it. Nothing wrong with Eastern mysticism per se, but it's the circumstances in which it's being pushed and whether it represents a social engineering agenda or not. The 60s scene definitely did, and that whole hippie ethos, that whole zeitgeist of those times did produce a number of so-called entrepreneurs who went on to found big tech and IT companies. You can be sure that many of them have attended Burning Man over the years as a condition of their position. So just before I get into why it is that Burning Man has been in the news in recent days, I just want to play a quick clip from that Good Vibrations interview that I did with Steve Altroom in 2017, where he shares some of his experiences of attending this very weird event.
I first went to Burning Man in 1998, and quite a senior person in the technology industry suggested to me that I really needed to go, that everybody went there, and that was part of the key to becoming in Silicon Valley was to tap into these networks. So I became a huge fan of Burning Man, and I started a blog called burners.me, .me. And originally, really, it was a bit of a fanboy page. But I noticed that the leadership of the Burning Man organization, that they made some very big claims quite often, and sometimes they didn't check out. And as I started to fact check their claims more and more, I started to get a suspicion that there was something else going on here.
So the reason Burning Man has been in the news the last few days is because somewhere around 70,000 people are said to have been stranded out in the middle of the desert, Black Rock City, with no way of getting out and with no way of any sort of supplies getting in. What we're told is that extreme weather conditions resulted in unexpected downpours of rain, which never normally happens in that region of the desert, and it's produced a kind of mud or silt, which is very difficult to navigate through. So there are people there just saying that you can't get cars in and out or trucks. You can't walk in it because your feet just get stuck in this mud. Seems to be an ancient lake bed, from what we're told, which never normally is exposed to that much rain. And the amount of moisture that has appeared has produced impossible conditions for the people there. So I'm hearing horrible stories about portaloos overflowing, and there's human waste everywhere. There's no way of getting rid of it. Food is running out, water is running out, and there's just no way that people can get out of that situation. It sounds like a bloody nightmare. So many of these IT professionals, these high earners, who would have gone out there presumably as a condition of their employment, are now undergoing these horrific circumstances. A number of performers too, any of the DJs, any of the music acts that are out there would be in a similar position. So Carl Cox has been out there this year. He's made brief reference to it on his Facebook page. He's making light of the situation, posting photos of himself smiling and saying, oh, we're just having fun and making the best of it. But I can't imagine it's very much fun to be out there right now. Here's a brief video clip from Jason Sherker, who's another guy I've had as a guest on Good Vibrations in the past. He went out to Burning Man this year. He says to install a piece of art to try and bring some positive sort of upliftment to the dark energy of that event, and he's been caught out there with no way of escape. Here's what he's had to say about it. This is a screen recording that I had to make of his YouTube video. I used to have a couple of methods of being able to download YouTube videos so that I could then embed them, but both of those resources have stopped working, so there doesn't seem to be any way of grabbing YouTube videos anymore. Go figure. But here's what Jason Sherker has had to say about his experiences of the past few days.
So no food, no gas, no electricity. There is a lot left right now, but they're saying that we're probably going to be here until like Wednesday or Thursday. I'm trying to figure something out as we speak. And for everybody who's been texting me, yeah, I'm fine, everything's okay. It's just going to get to a point where there's a big problem. And we're figuring it out. So this is currently the situation. You can't really go anywhere. I put plastic bags on my shoes because the actual mud wouldn't come off the boot, which is crazy. It's like a type of mud. Some people look at this and they're like, what's the big deal? You literally can't walk through there. You can't ride a bike through there. You can't drive a car through there. You can't do anything. You will get stuck with no way out. So what I did here is that Chris Rock, the actor, managed to get out and somebody picked him up. So trying to understand what's going on, how all those things are possible. And I'm already hearing some very interesting things, like this is not normal and it's not natural. I don't know what's going on there, so I don't want to speak on that. But what I will say is this is, from what I've heard, the first time that this has happened in like 20 years. So it's definitely unusual and out of the ordinary. The question is like why, what, all those things, you know, like what that motive would be if that's the case. But I'm not even going there yet because I'm currently just in it trying to figure out what's going on. So
he says the hope is that things would start to get moving by about Wednesday, Thursday, which is now. So I'll keep an eye on that over the coming days. I'm just very grateful that I'm not out there in Nevada myself undergoing that. Not that I'd have any reason or desire to be at a freakish event like Burning Man. He does raise the interesting question there of whether there's been some sort of tampering or manipulation of the weather to deliberately cause this. And I do have to wonder if there are ritualistic elements to it, given that it comes in the wake of the fires in Maui, Hawaii, which bear all the hallmarks of having been caused by direct energy weapons. So it's a human-caused event rather than something caused by global climate warming change. Those of us paying attention to that event will be aware of this factor. So right on the heels of these wild fires in Maui, we have this bizarre spectacle at Burning Man. Are these connected? When it comes to the sick, ritualistic belief systems of these occult practitioners, nothing would surprise me. Either way, I think it is time that people started paying attention to what goes on at Burning Man. Will it happen again next year? Who knows? But with it taking place on military land, with it being drenched in so much symbolism, and I would suggest not for the upliftment and the betterment of all humanity, and with the strong transhumanist overtones that that event has, the merging of humanity with technology, which is something that incidentally Carl Cox and many of these other EDM producers embody, the likes of Skrillex and Diplo who play at Burning Man. Carl Cox himself had an album way back in 1995 called FACT, an acronym for Future Alliance of Communication and Technology. And his latest album project has been titled Electronic Generations, where on the sleeve you've got the familiar image of humans rising up from apes and sort of undergoing stages of evolution. And the ultimate stage of evolution involves a robot, a cyborg, go figure. So he's been pushing ideas of transhumanism and AI for some time and popularising it among those who lap up his music and the whole electronic dance music techno scene generally. Burning Man, I feel, deserves some further scrutiny from people. And if it does go ahead again in 2024, I think many more questions need to be raised. In the last video, I questioned whether the controllers, the sick ones, are attempting to circle back round with a revival of our old friend Convid. There's been a lot of banging of the drums, particularly in America, concerning the possible return of mask mandates, lockdowns, and all the rest of it. One thing that happened in the last week is that a very interesting video was posted by Donald Trump. Now, I'll get the disclaimer out of the way. I'm no fan of Donald Trump. I don't endorse him in any way. I don't actually trust him. I've been through a process where I've looked at this idea of a so-called plan and white hats and Q and all the rest of it. Way past that now. Come through the other side. But nevertheless, this video that he put out last week is going to influence huge numbers of people in America. So he's saying directly that if the Biden administration attempts a Convid comeback, then everyone should resist it and refuse to comply with any of it. Now, this is a powerful message. Whatever you may think of Donald Trump, like him, hate him, the fact remains that hundreds of millions of Americans will hang on his every word. So for somebody like him to say, resist, do not comply, is a very strong message that is going to be adopted by those who follow him. We can question what the motives may be behind this. Are there attempts afoot to foment a civil war in the United States between sort of Trump and Biden supporting camps? Either way, this video would suggest that any attempt now from the Biden administration to reinforce the nonsense is going to be met in America with huge resistance. And if that's the case in America, if they're trying to restart this agenda on American shores, the rest of the world is going to be watching, and it's going to be much more difficult to enforce it in these other regions as well. So, whatever you think of him, have a listen to this message posted by Trump just a few days ago, in case you missed it.
The left-wing lunatics are trying very hard to bring back COVID lockdowns and mandates with all of their sudden fear-mongering about the new variants that are coming. Gee whiz, you know what else is coming? An election. They want to restart the COVID hysteria so they can justify more lockdowns, more censorship, more illegal drop boxes, more mail-in ballots, and trillions of dollars in payoffs to their political allies heading into the 2024 election. Does that sound familiar? These are bad people. These are sick people we're dealing with. But to every COVID tyrant who wants to take away our freedom, hear these words: we will not comply. So don't even think about it. We will not shut down our schools. We will not accept your lockdowns. We will not abide by your mask mandates. And we will not tolerate your vaccine mandates. They rigged the 2020 election, and now they're trying to do the same thing all over again by rigging the most important election in the history of our country, the 2024 election, even if it means trying to bring back COVID. But they will fail because we will not let it happen. When I'm back in the White House, I will use every available authority to cut federal funding to any school, college, airline, or public transportation system that imposes a mask mandate or a vaccine mandate. Thank you very much.
All right, so on to the mailbag function. In the last video, I read out a piece of correspondence from a viewer who suspected that her mind was getting read somehow by the electronic devices in her house. I've received another piece of correspondence in response to that, so I just want to read out this. This guy's written in to say, you spoke about your suspicion about mind-reading technology in our devices. Let me tell you a story. More than 1 year ago, it was so obvious to me that my ads pop up straight after me thinking about certain subjects. or even feelings such as pain were detected and treatments were offered. So I decided to run an experiment. I said, okay, I'll think about something I've never thought of before, or spoken aloud, or written down. So I put a mobile phone near my head and I thought of a light bulb. I visualised a picture of it and said words with my mind only. Words such as bulb, lamp, and also in a few other languages that I can speak. The next day, it started. Light bulbs were everywhere in my ads as the first result, on Facebook, YouTube, and all the rest. I'm not asking anyone to believe it, but try it for yourself, and you be the proof. My phone is an average LG bought in Australia in 2020. I now live in rural Sweden, far away from any antennas. I do not have a smart meter in my house and no other smart devices, and I'm not jabbed with the old Britney Spears either. So if our devices really are reading our minds, that's going to be major cause for concern. I like to think I might be a little bit safer with this, which I still rock, rather than any kind of smartphone, but then I do use other devices, so who knows. The T-shirt I'm wearing this time around is another of the new designs that I've just had done. Simply not this one. A powerful message, meaning you might be able to reach others in society with your mind control and your social engineering, your brainwashing, but you don't get this one that easily. I rise above all of that, not this one. So this is available as with the other designs in white with the blue lettering. There's also a black version with yellow gold lettering in 4 sizes: small, medium, large, XL. Details below as to how you can get hold of one of these if you wish to rock one. I do take my t-shirts out to all my live speaking events, and as ever there's plenty of those coming up. So the next one to mention is this Sunday, the 10th of September. That's in Romsey, Hampshire. I'm one of 5 speakers at an all-day event there. I'm going to be talking about sound frequencies and how all of that can be either weaponized to do great harm or used for great healing and upliftment. Next event after that is on Saturday, 16th of September, and that's in Royal Tunbridge Wells, a venue called Subud. So that's an evening event kicking off around about 6:30, 7 o'clock. I'll be talking about music's military and mind control connections. I do get a lot of messages from people in London and the southeast saying, how come you never speak down here? All your gigs seem to be up north and all over the place. And it's true that I don't often get to the southeast. So if you're in London or that general area, Kent, Sussex, and you want to get along to this one, Tunbridge Wells is reasonably accessible just off the M25. It would be good to see as many people as possible at that one. It's an opportunity to catch me down in the south. Don't know when I'll next be in that general region. Next event beyond that is another Soul Space conference taking place in Middlesbrough over the weekend of 23rd, 24th of September. The last one in July was really good. An amazing array of topics being discussed: spirituality, sovereignty, empowerment, all this good stuff. So that's put together by Nathan Lucius. Maureen and Dawn from Truth Seekers Northeast are going to be down there. Steve James from up Newcastle sides also is going to be speaking. David Edelman is going to be speaking. John Hamer, allegedly Dave Murphy, and there's going to be 2 talks from myself. If you can get along to Middlesbrough, please do. 23rd, 24th of September. Details of all of these events are on the appropriate page of my website. Link is down below. Next event beyond that is Tuesday 26th of September. This is in Qstoke Village Hall, just outside Weston Supermare, very close to Bristol. Tuesday evening kicks off around about 7 o'clock. After that we're into October, and my first event there is on Saturday the 7th with the aforementioned Truth Seekers Northeast in Walkerville, Newcastle upon Tyne. So that's going to be my dark occult aspects of the band Queen presentation. Currently putting that together. Lots of very interesting stuff is getting uncovered about that group. So the first airing for that talk is in Newcastle, and that's on Saturday 7th of October. Beyond that, on Wednesday the 11th, I'm going to be back on Teesside at the Billingham Synthonia. This is Billingham, just outside Stockton-on-Tees, an evening presentation there. I think I'll be doing my Nostalgia Side one at that event. Then it's out to the United States, nonsense permitting, so long as nothing comes along to prevent it, but I'm not going to allow it to. So I've been invited to speak at the Flatober Fest event in Las Vegas, and that's taken place over the weekend of the 20th and the 21st of October. Going to be coming out of the UK with the aforementioned Dave Murphy. He's also a featured speaker at that event, so we're both flying out specially for it and then straight back again. And there's the likes of Jeren, Mark Sargent and many others speaking at that one. If you can get along to Vegas to be a part of that event, it'd be great to see you there. Then it's all about Australia. First week in November, my long-awaited mini speaking tour of Australia, touching down in Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney and Perth, or in the outskirts of, and that takes place between the 1st and the 5th of November. If you're in Australia or know anyone that is, and you can get along to those events, these are going to be exclusive presentations put together specifically for an Australian crowd. Look forward to seeing everyone out there. This trip has been a long time coming, and again, I'm not going to let anything get in the way of it. That's pretty much it for this time around. I'm going to be getting back on the circuit with some podcasts and some interviews in the coming weeks. I have to take a bit of downtime from all of that over these summer months because there's so many challenges on my time with, family and home life stuff, as well as the usual work output. The Sound of Now will be reappearing hopefully at the end of this month. That's my weekly soulful uplifting house music excursion. I do enjoy putting that together. I've really missed the tunes, so I'm looking forward to stockpiling some of those and seeing what I've missed over the weeks. That will be unleashed very soon, as will a new instalment of The Sound of Freedom, my conscious music podcast, and we're just about to hit the 10th anniversary of that with a special show to mark the occasion. Watch out for all of that in the coming weeks. I ain't going anywhere. Well, I will be physically from this place soon, but in terms of my output, I'm on BitChute, I'm on Odyssey, I'm on Rumble. I do have a 4th YouTube channel currently, until anything happens to that, where I'm promoting the work over on my other platforms. And everything else resides at Spreaker.com for my audio and at djmarkdevlin.com for links to everywhere else. The writing of my allegorical novel, The Gift and the Curse, the follow-up to The Cause and the Cure, is now completed. I'm just reading through the manuscript, and when that's been properly proofread, it's going to get sent over for typesetting. And then the next stage beyond that is publication, matching up the cover design. I've had another great one done for me by Nick Smith for that book. I think people are going to be feeling that. And this is a story set in Oxford once again, but this time in 2001. Anything interesting happened that year? Can you remember? Featuring many of the characters from The Cause and the Cure, so I'm hoping to get that book out by the end of October. If I do, I'll be able to have copies with me when I get out to Australia. But it's going to be sometime in the coming weeks. Watch out for that one being fully available. And beyond that, well, who knows? Plenty of other projects in the offing. So stay close. Catch you soon.